And again, another evening filled with news that you've heard some about and things that have been hidden from you. So we'll have a special section, oh gosh, around, I'd say around 8:20, in which we will go over very quickly the censored news. So we get that in because there really are two big stories to cover tonight that I'd like to get your opinions on, and also Ted and Mike. And so see if you can call in or even text into us so that we can get your opinions on these things. The first one, of course, is the horrible news, just another indication, excuse me, just another indication of how the system of justice in this country, it's crashed. You know, like a stock market crashed in 29, it's kind of crashed. So Donald Trump revealed today on his Truth account that he's been given a target letter, or sent a target letter by Special Prosecutor Smith, who's running the, I don't really know what the title of his investigation is. Is it the January 6th investigation, or the alternative elector investigation, or the investigation looking for a crime? Because the first two aren't. Or somehow Trump caused January 6th with his absolutely insightful words, go to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically. Or assistant United States attorney. Gosh, it was a really very difficult crime. You had to virtually lead the riot. Even violent words or violent expressions of opinions weren't enough to convict you of incitement because of the First Amendment, which we used to. Now, somewhere along the pandemic route, first the petty little dictators, otherwise known as Democrat governors, did away with the right of free speech. The Biden administration virtually did the same thing to free speech that they've done to the criminal justice system. They eviscerated it with the conspiracy they had with the media, all of the other new methods of conveying information, and of course a lot of major corporations to censor the news, to not print anything harmful to Biden, and to print everything harmful to Trump, including things that weren't true. Of course, the major one was the entire fictional allegation about Russian collusion. And then, of course, the unbelievable, probably nothing like this ever happened in American history, the suppression of maybe the most relevant piece of information that American voters would need to make a decision ever in the history of America, the Hunter Biden hard drive, which was filled with so many crimes that I can't even quantify them for you. If I said over 50 involving both President Biden and his son, I would not be exaggerating. It would depend on the way you charge them. Several different versions of RICO cases. Things that got pretty close, or may get pretty close to treason, when finally investigated, particularly with China, taking all that money from China and helping China with things that were detrimental to the United States. All of that, just has transformed this country into a very different country than we had just four or 5 years ago. Well, the letter today that he's a target of, I don't know what. I'm not sure I know what the investigation is about. Now, I was a witness. I voluntarily complied with their request. I answered their questions honestly and straightforwardly, except for the ones that were privileged. I indicated those, and they have the opportunity, if they want, to have a judge decide on privilege. I really have to do that as a lawyer, whether I want to or I don't want to. And I have to tell you, in many cases, if not all, Now, I could say all. Look, let me make it simple. Several completely disreputable publications have written a completely false story. I don't have time to correct all the false stories that are written about me. As Ted knows, I only do it if they reach some level of attention where it's necessary to respond to them. Because if I did, that's all I'd be doing, correcting either misimpressions, exaggerations, or straight out and out lies. Let me give you a straight out and out lie. Several slimy fake news outlets have written headlines saying that I'm cooperating against Donald Trump. Or I think one of them used the word, I flipped. Well, first of all, I did not. Second, what they mean by flip is that I gave them incriminating evidence. Well, that would be impossible because I don't have any. I mean, I could testify from here to the cows come home, and all I can tell you is information that indicates that Donald Trump is an innocent man, which is the reason I defended him with the emotion and the commitment that I did. Because to me, as a lawyer, particularly as a former prosecutor, the idea of convicting an innocent man is intolerable in America. I was brought up that way. I was trained that way. I was trained that way by Whitney Norris Seymour, who was the first U.S. attorney I worked for. I was trained that way by Silvio Malo, his chief assistant, and by Paul Curran, and by Judge Tyler, and by Judge McMahon. And it's as much a part of me as my head. And the evidence that I gave to them is the evidence I was allowed to, given the restrictions of attorney-client privilege. And it was more than half, maybe even quite a bit more than half of the questions were not privileged. And I was able to answer them. And it was the truth. To the extent that I can remember all the things that happened then. And I have to tell you, they conducted it in a very professional way. I have no complaints about the way it was conducted. They didn't try to fool me. They didn't try to trick me. They didn't play the games that some of the former prosecutors have done. And they handled the questioning the way I would, or the people that I trained. And I don't have any incriminating information. So I can't flip unless I want to lie, which I won't do. And I can't say they put pressure on me to do that, but I do know of situations in the long, many versions of this investigation where people did change their testimony in order to try to seek preferment. I mean, the most famous one is Michael Cohen, who literally just in his congressional testimony alone committed 6 to 7 to 8 major perjuries, all of which were referred to the Justice Department, none of which were even looked at. The clearest example is he stood before that committee right after he was told that you would have serious consequences for perjury. And he said, I never asked for a job in the White House. And I could right now juxtapose for you him on television with Chris Cuomo 4 or 5 days after the election, telling Chris Cuomo he wanted to be and thought he was going to be appointed as the chief of staff. And Cuomo congratulated him. And then we had about 20 other examples of how he was desperately looking for a job. It was about as clear a perjury as you could find. And of course, they did nothing with it. Or with the other 10 or 12 lies that he told. And Cohen did flip in the sense that he told them information that was untrue to seek preferment, benefits. Now, he was such a bad liar that the Southern District of New York threw him out. They didn't use him as a witness because he was inherently incredible, because he had lied so often. So let's get it straight. where they say I flipped. I didn't. Did not give any evidence that was in any way remotely incriminating as to Donald Trump. And I did that because I don't have any. And they question me all over again. It'll be the same answer. It's easy when you tell the truth. You don't have to come up with 5 versions of it. The only time you're going to have a different version of it is, given the fact that these are complex situations, you may remember something new, or you may have it in inverse order. So, having gone through that testimony, I don't know how they could possibly be saying these things. My evaluation of the people who conducted, the men and women who conducted this interview, both the DOJ people and the FBI people, they were people of the highest integrity, at least the ones that questioned me. And look, I've been wrong about that analysis before. Everyone has, but I doubt it. So I don't know who's perpetrating these lies, but it ain't the first time.
Well, of course, Mayor, I can tell you that these lies are partially perpetrated by the left and the Democrats, and I would say a good portion of what we'll call the legacy media in this country, who fantasize, probably, we'll leave it at that. They fantasize at the idea of someone like you, who, I mean, the idea that you would ever even consider committing perjury for anyone.
Yeah, I mean,
it's insane. And so it's.
I have. What the loyalty I owe to someone I represent or to someone I work for or with is not to cover up crimes. That's not loyalty. That's obstruction of justice. I know that better than anyone. So when I said I was going to testify, not raise any privilege of incrimination of any kind, that was a very well thought out decision with an excellent lawyer, Bob Costello, who's been through this investigation with me, almost from the beginning. So I had the benefit of his advice on what I could answer and what I couldn't. And also, in every place where I took a privilege, I left open the fact that if you can get a judge to say the privilege doesn't apply, well, of course, then I would have to testify. But if I didn't get that ruling by a judge, as a lawyer, I can't waive the privilege. It's not my privilege. It's the privilege of an American citizen. Donald Trump is still an American citizen. He's not treated that way, but he is. He's treated instead like a punching bag. It's remarkable that he can function the way he does under these circumstances. I'm a pretty strong guy, and I have just complete admiration. I have just complete admiration for him. So now, I'm going into the details of my testimony, because I'm not going to do what I criticize in others, which is to reveal the details of a confidential interview where little pieces of it can be misunderstood. I mean, just abhorrent to me that you would do that. But in any event, I can tell you some general conclusions. What is it that they could prosecute him for? Well, one, I guess, would be the electors. The electors were perfectly open. Every bit of information about them was known. Nobody lied about it. Nobody committed fraud about it. They weren't electors. They were alternative electors, and they were electors in the sense that if the vote changed and the lawful authorities had determined that in a particular state, Trump won and not Biden, after the Electoral College met, you had to have electors that could be substituted. Now, this wasn't an invention of Donald Trump. This was done at least on one occasion in 1960 in the Kennedy-Nixon election, where alternate electors selected, and then the state flipped, and they were entitled to have the alternate electors replace the others. maybe because it's been used so infrequently, it gave people or some people the sense that there was something wrong with this. But it was done openly. It was done honestly. Some of the people who participated in it had concerns about it because they had never heard about it before. But from what I could see, Professor Eastman provided the legal analysis for this. But from what I could see, it was based on prior precedent. And second, it was done openly. There's no one that was confused that these people were just going to be substituted. The official body in charge of making the decision, if they had changed the decision, which they can do, then the electors would be available. So that one, I don't understand what crime would have been committed with that. The second, of course, is the idea that somehow he caused January 6th. Well, there's no evidence that he did that. And in fact, there's powerful evidence to the contrary, particularly his last statement to the crowd, which was a very calm, peaceful crowd, which was to go to the Capitol. If they were going to go to the Capitol, they go to the Capitol, or we should go to the Capitol, but we should act peacefully and patriotically. So whatever happened there, and we know that we can't even be sure really what happened there. There's no doubt that some very bad things were done, and there's also no doubt it was grossly exaggerated. And there's also no doubt there was a lot of infiltration of it. And all of those things are true. And I mean, at one time it was described as an insurrection. Nobody's been charged with insurrection. No one's been convicted of insurrection. And nobody had a gun. So how are you going to do an insurrection without having weapons? And there was no plan for insurrection. Like, what's going to follow it? And at various times, there were leaks of the FBI investigation saying they never found any evidence of a prior plan. So then exactly how did Trump do this if there's no evidence of it? You may disagree with how he handled it after it got started, or you may not. But that certainly doesn't mean that he caused it. There are people, and I'm not going to go into all the details, during the course of the couple of years before that made much more inflammatory statements encouraging the 2020 riots that got closer to incitement. But even there, because of the very, very strong legal bar to incitement as a crime, because it violates your First Amendment right of free speech, they really, as far as I could tell, didn't pass the line. I don't know what else they could be, that he was making false statements about the election. That may be more what's being investigated by the district attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. But I can assure you he was making statements based on information that he had, as I was, from other people. I have produced, in the course of all of the cases that I'm involved in and the disbarment proceedings, I've produced hundreds, thousands of documents showing them where I got the information that I used. Sometimes it's backed up by many affidavits. Sometimes it's backed up by statements that weren't sworn, but there are still statements. And sometimes it was backed up by what people told me or what I saw myself. And then they described it to me. It was all based on the standard that I would use as a lawyer. A lawyer, in order to make an allegation, has to have a reasonable basis for it. Obviously, he can't know it's untrue, and he has to have a reasonable basis for believing it's true. It may turn out that it isn't. Not uncommon in both investigations and in cases. You make allegations based on the quantum of information you have at the time. In a long investigation, in a complex situation, that changes. Now, if you don't grant that, well, then you really have an authoritarian system in which you're playing a game. So I don't see how they're going to charge that either. Now, of course, there have been charges brought here already that are not criminal and they're not even wrong. You look at the case that they describe as the strongest case that they brought a few weeks ago. I don't even see how that's a crime. Or the case in New York involving the non-disclosure agreement, which is a perfectly legal thing to do, and it also, I mean, just as a very important matter, happens to be barred by the statute of limitations, and they haven't even in the indictment. If you look at it, they haven't actually even properly charged a crime in that one. So I don't know what this is about. I mean, I don't know what this is going to lead to. I mean, if you look at the step they took, that step is really only taken if they, I shouldn't say that. In a case like this, I would think that step would only be taken if you really have made the decision to indict. In less sensitive cases or less scrutinized cases, prosecutors might send out letters like that. And then when they get to the charging period, they may have gathered facts or come to a different conclusion. The mere fact that you send a target letter does not mean necessarily you've reached a decision to indict. It means that you have sufficient evidence to put that person in the category of they may be indicted. So you've got three categories. Witness, there's no suggestion, thought, or whatever that the person committed a crime. He was just a witness. Subject is somebody about which you have not made any decision to indict. You've made no decision really that there's even probable cause to put him in that category or her category of target, but they're not just a witness, they're a subject. And then finally, target is you believe you have sufficient evidence to indict. Doesn't mean you have indicted. You don't indict until you do, until the grand jury frankly makes that decision. Although, look, let's be honest, grand juries 99% of the time follow the recommendation of the prosecutor. And go ahead.
No, Mayor, I just wanted to ask your opinion. I was reading in the Post this morning that the prosecutor for the Trump case with the classified documents says the trial probably won't start till next year. So do you think the Democrats have some kind of crazy thing they're trying to delay all these trials until the presidential election to try to make Trump look bad?
Sure. I think the only reason they brought the case.
Yeah. But delaying it would make him look like he's not a legitimate candidate or whatever like that. In other people's eyes, obviously, not, like.
Well, you almost have to delay it to next year. You can't really prepare a defense in the period of time that they have allotted, and not because of the facts, but because of the law. let's look at the one they filed last time. I mean, there are so many legal questions that have to be decided there before you can get to trial, and they are necessarily have to be raised before trial. In other words, you can't just go to trial and say, well, if you obviously if you get acquitted, it ends. But if you get convicted, you have to raise these things before trial, or you're said to have waived them. Not every single issue, but most. So, and in a case like this, nobody's going to take the chance of waiving. I mean, no responsible lawyer in a case that is as really as unscrupulous as that case, a lawyer would be making a horrible mistake if they didn't raise every argument they had before trial, because there are many good legal justifications for dismissing it. Same thing is true in the New York case. New York case should be dismissed. In fact, it should be dismissed because it doesn't state a crime. They still haven't described what crime he was furthering by somehow. I mean, the crime they charged him with was the entry of false records, false accounting records. Well, the only way they get that to a felony is that has to be in pursuance of another crime. But that's all they say in the indictment, that he did it in pursuance of another crime. They don't tell him, which means they don't charge him with what that crime is. How that passed original muster is beyond me. I mean, you'd have to completely rewrite due process in order to sustain that indictment. So, unfortunately, I'm so suspicious of the political nature of some of the courts, particularly in the states that are one-party states that are beginning to approach something more akin to a state that existed in the Soviet Union or in China. Now, I don't know what the decision is going to be, and they all seem to be, no, Rudy, not quite true. Many of them seem to be partisan decisions. Every once in a while, you get surprised. I was personally surprised, not because I was supposed to be in this case. There was no reason I should have been put in at all. But I was originally involved in the case involving January 6th, and the judge dismissed me from the case because there was no evidence that I had anything to do with the violence. In fact, to the contrary. And the one statement they took out of context about trial by combat was clearly combat between the two machines. And what they did was, the newspapers did this, they left out the 3 sentences before and the 4 sentences after, which is talking about a scientific analysis of the machines to determine if the machines are able to be manipulated or not. I said, it'll be a trial by combat. And if it turns out that you're right, I'll apologize. And if it turns out that I'm right, well, you probably won't, but you'll have to drop the case. And the judge corrected it. And the judge was if I'm correct about this, was an Obama appointee and a Democrat. Well, God bless him. I mean, that showed, and in the opinion, if you read it, you can see he has no love for Trump and no love for me, and a lot of anger. But what he has left is his conscience as a judge. But that's not always the case in these opinions, where you see completely party line voting in court, which is very, very troublesome. So let's go to the Gilgo Beach case and compare it to the White House case.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it.
So Gilgo Beach is the case involving the arrest of this guy, Rex Howerman. This case is originally we said 13 years old. It may go back to 1996. The first wasn't the first body discovered, but one of the bodies discovered. The woman disappeared in 1996. And then her remains show up at the side of the road on Ocean Parkway, right next to Gilgo Beach. Again, I should clarify for you that these bodies were not buried on the beach. The bodies were discarded in the area between the highway and the beach, which is very, very, very much covered by a tremendous amount of bush and wild bushes, and in fact, in the summertime, you can't even see in there. Most of the film that you've seen and the photographs you've seen, because the discovery was in December of 2012, most of it is in the wintertime. So even in the wintertime, it's hard to see in all of that bush, but you can see better. And that is a case of two investigations. A first one that lasted for years, in which they arrested no one, they found no one, they didn't have a suspect. And one in which it looks like it was deliberately done that way because they didn't want to come to a conclusion. I mean, that, apart from now getting an answer to the rest of the people that are, rest of the women that were killed, that's got to be answered also, because if you listen to our show last night, or I would say the best presentation of this was by Greg Kelly last night on his show, where he took out and isolated the evidence available to them back in 2012, which would have indicated that they should have been able to find this guy almost with what I would call elementary level law enforcement techniques. So let me see if I can summarize it quickly for you. This whole thing really came to light in 2012 when a young woman named Shannon Gilbert disappeared in Oak Beach, New York. Oak Beach is a private community that is right behind, I guess would be the way to describe it, but right adjacent to Gilgo Beach. And in between it is marshland. And marshland that is difficult to navigate, to walk through. And then you get to the beach. It's a private community. And Shannon was there with her driver, and she was servicing a client. She was a prostitute, and I say that without any moral judgment or judgment about her, because when you read this case and you read the background of these young women who were killed, if you don't cry, you're not human. These are kids, because I mean, they were 22 and 23 and 24, all of whom had extraordinarily difficult time in life to get to the situation of deciding they had to be escorts in order to support themselves. And a few of them were drug addicts and had become drug addicts because of the kind of life that is. And she went out there and something went wrong. We don't know what went wrong in the home of the John, but all of a sudden she called 911. Now, this 911 tape was suppressed for 10 years. It was never played. And the 911 tape, although you could interpret it two ways, did contain statements very, very clearly that she was telling the 911 operator that she was in fear of her life, that she was being pursued by someone or endangered by someone. She did have difficulties describing where she was, But after all, she arrived there in this gated community at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in total darkness. So when she can't describe to the 911 operator where she is, it's not because she doesn't want to, it's because she doesn't know. She didn't even know she was in that particular community. When she was asked, "Where are you?" she finally said, I don't know. She said, "I'm on Long Island." Long Island is 120 miles long. I think at one point I don't know if she said Jones Beach, but Jones Beach is about 10 miles long. She never said, "I'm in Oak Beach." She never did. When she left the Johns house, she ran into a house of another man who tried to help her. And she was in a high state of anxiety. And he called 911 for her and gave a better description, which then did activate the police to get there 40 minutes later. I think that's right, 40 minutes later. And then she went to another home of a woman who didn't let her in because she was frightened. I'm not criticizing this woman. She had no idea what she was walking into, right? But she did make a 911 call also. But when Shannon made the 911 call, she kept her phone on for how long, Ted? About 30 minutes?
I'd say about that time.
Yeah, I think it was actually 32 minutes. So you get like a running description of it. You can hear her leave one house, go to another house. You'll hear these men in the background. She's at one point saying, "They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me." And then toward the end of the 911 call, you can hear her screaming, frightened and screaming and running away. And then she disappeared. And that remained that way for a year before they found her body. But as a result of that, they searched the whole beach. And that's when they found the original 4 girls that are now the subject of the indictment of Howerman, or at least 3 of them are. And these are the 4 girls that were left disposed of, not really buried, in a burlap sack and placed like under the bushes, maybe 30, 40 feet, maybe more than that, off the highway and the bicycle path. And they were there for quite some time. I mean, one of them for 3 years or 4 years.
Should we show them the bicycle path briefly? We have the video.
Yeah, I think it's important to show them. So when you visualize this, you don't think of a beach. The reason you might think of a beach is they've shown film of the original search. And of course, they searched the beach, but they found no one on the beach itself. So tell me when you're playing it. Are we playing it? Well, perfectly situated. Yep. A little more this way. A little back that way.
I don't. Yeah, depending on how exact it is. Be careful.
I don't know how exact it is. Here, this will be perfect.
I don't know if I can catch it on my camera here, but there are bugs everywhere. And so I don't want to get too much here. Apparently, this is a swampland.
Are, and that the killer, the murderer, allegedly Howerman, would bring the body wrapped in this
burlap
and put it there. Now, before we get to the investigation that led to being able to indict Howerman, going back to 2010. This is the information that the police had. First of all, they found out from the boyfriend of Amber Costello, who is the first of this group of 4 to go missing in 2010. The murderer, the John, came to pick her up. So the boyfriend gave the police back in 2010 the following information: that the person who picked her up was in a Chevy Avalanche, a particular model of the Chevy Avalanche that was fairly rare and easy to discover because it had an unusual window in the back, a triangular window separating what I guess, considering the fact that it's kind of like a truck, small truck, separating the cabin where you drive from the I would consider it the trunk, but of course it's the part of the truck in which you put things. And it's a very distinctive car. And I don't think there were that many even in New York State. So you had the benefit of a fairly unusual car that the murderer showed up in. The boyfriend, or maybe he was more than that. I don't want to call him a bad name. I don't know him, and I don't want to. I'm not sure. Let's just say the boyfriend at this point. The boyfriend also said that the person in the car, who must have gotten out at some point to put her in the car, but he said that the guy was between 6'4" and 6'6", and that he was white, and that he was very big, but not muscular big, which sounds to me like he really might have said fat, right? Very, or obese. I mean, the man is obese, actually. And had a very distinctive look. I don't know if he did, but other witnesses described him as looking like an ogre. Frightening look. So now you have the automobile, right, of the murderer, or at least of her, and you have a description, and the automobile is kind of self-limiting, and the description is 2 years later, as they were investigating after they found the bodies, I believe, they were able to determine that by getting the burner phones of the victims, and they were able to determine that there were many calls in each one of their cases that come back to 4 different towers, all of which are in Massapequa Park, New York. So now you have the guy's car. You've got the unusual description of him, right? And you have the location of where apparently, or the best you could do as to where he comes from, Massapequa, New York. They also had information that determined, because he would come into Penn Station all the time and make calls from there, that he must have worked in Midtown Manhattan. Now, I'm going to tell you, as a one-time, very, very active and successful investigator, I have no doubt that a competent investigator with those 4 pieces of information could have caught Howerman. And I'll tell you why. Massapequa, New York has a population of 17,000 people. That's very small. Massapequa, Ted, when we were driving there on Saturday and we were going to try to find Howerman's house, right? You tell him our conversation to show you how.
That's right. So our conversation, as we're coming in, I'm driving, Mayor's sitting shotgun, and we're coming in hot, Massapequa Park, and I pose the usual question. Mayor, we put the address in the GPS. Where are we going? Mayor, as cool and calmly as usual, says, Ted, don't worry, we'll have this place within 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, all right, I trust the mayor, right? I trust him every time a mayor says, let's go. So the mayor made a very clear point that we were going to find the place by going there within 10 minutes. driving around, you'll be able to tell by which house has the most activity out front. And lo and behold, we get there.
And we got it in
No
3 minutes.
address. We got it in 3 minutes. We're going down the street.
And anybody could. This is not
That's the
particularly
point.
ingenious. And I'm going to tell you why I said that. I know Massapequa Park. I've been through it many times. I lived in a town 3 away, and I had a girlfriend for 3 years that lived in Massapequa, the adjoining town. And they kind of flow into each other. You know, you go to dinner in one place, and you can cover all of Massapequa in 20 minutes in a car. In other words, you could look at every house in Massapequa in 20 minutes. And and we had a general idea of where he was, so we only have to cover about 4 or 5 blocks. But even if we had to cover all of Massapequa Park, it would have taken us 10 minutes to cover it. What that means is you got a car called the Chevy Avalanche, and you've got Massapequa Park. They screwed up the check with the Department of Motor Vehicles because they described the vehicle incorrectly. And the computer said no such vehicle because they described it. And I may have this reversed. Ted, you may remember this better. They described it as did they describe it as a SUV, or it turned out that they describe it as like a truck. They have 3 different descriptions, and if you don't have the right one, they don't give you the information. That's kind of silly because a Chevy Avalanche, as I said, is a pretty unusual car. But in any event, I don't know why you even have to do that. Greg on his show last night made a very excellent point that in many cases, people are getting lazy because of technology. In the old days, when you didn't have that technology, you'd have gotten off your backside, you'd have gotten in your police car, and you would have driven around. You'd have driven around the little town of Massapequa Park, maybe as many times as you had to find the Chevy Avalanche. And lo and behold, there's a picture of the Chevy Avalanche back in 2012, parked right in front of Howerman's house. I'm going to tell you another thing.
And we have that picture right up on the screen now. That's the Avalanche.
Okay, and now I want that house look better then than it does now.
Bushes look cut.
This house, I'm going to tell you another way you'd have found this guy, Howerman. If you drive through Massapequa Park, the houses are different. There are some very, very fairly big houses. There are fairly small houses. But the one thing about Massapequa Park, and this is a great credit to them, it's a beautiful community in the sense that it's almost pristine. Nothing on, not like New York City would all come. Not when I was mayor, because I had Adopt a Highway. I had a whole squad that picked up stuff, and I encourage people to pick up stuff and not leave it out there so that our city looked good so we could sell it. So people would come and live with us instead of being a bunch of pigs. These people are not pigs. They are very, very prideful about their property. Maybe I saw 3 or 4 lawns that needed to be cut, and that was it. Otherwise, I saw beautiful lawns. The houses were kept as if this was a community of mansions, right?
That's right. They're tidy.
Honestly, I've been in communities of mansions that aren't as nice as
exactly that. It wasn't necessarily the size of the homes, but just how tidy and how much work they put in their front lawns.
And
it was very
not
active.
Used to New York, but this would be a credit to any place in Michigan, right?
100%. So being from Michigan, it reminded me of the great communities outside Detroit. These are bedroom communities. They all and Massapequa Park, right, Mayor? How many people we saw out and about? Not just obviously around the alleged serial killer's home, but the town in general. Very active, families out,
beautiful
every
baseball
yard.
Fields.
Yes.
It's
Classic
a
all-American
lovely
town.
place, and I guess depending on your situation, you would describe it as middle class. You might. I mean, to a lot, it could be. I mean, a lot of these homes, when you put in the net value of the home and other things, a lot of these people could technically be millionaires. I would say the homes range from a low of about 400,000 to a high of maybe $1.5 million, depending on whether they, depending on a lot of things. But in any event, if you drove through it now, nobody would have to tell you his house. If you drive past this house and you were doing this investigation, and Ted and I were doing it back in 2012, we would have said, maybe even jokingly, I bet a killer lives there. The house looks like crap in an overwhelming sea of beautiful places. It stands out like a sore thumb. In fact, neighbors used to joke that there must be a whole bunch of bodies in that house. And generally the kids passed it up on Halloween because it was like, there must be something wrong with this house. It's so poorly kept. I think you'd have taken a chance just looking at the house that this was the killer, even if you didn't see the Chevy Avalanche. Then if you went around and asked the people of Massapequa, how many guys are 6'4" to 6'6" and obese? There are 17,000 people. Generally, there are more women than men. So about 8,000 men? About 8,000 men. So now we're looking for a man that's 6'5".
So take out most people under the, I mean, look,
so we got 8,000 as
8,000 males, not men, 8,000 males, right? We're
so
counting kids, right?
Take the kids out.
What, Mayor, I mean, just the being a large man, I bet you we're already down to 1,000 people, maybe.
Oh, I bet less.
Less. And that's just a 6'4", right? It's probably like 50 people over 6'2".
And we're not
maybe
talking about
30.
I'm not talking about 6'4" skinny.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm talking about 6'4". I'm not talking about 6'4" fat. I'm talking about 6'4" obese. I think the word, the technical description, not meant to be an insult, but really, who cares if I insult him? Is morbid. This guy's morbidly obese.
I don't know many tall people that are morbidly obese, so
yeah. So
you have a point there.
I think if you did it enough, you used enough shoe leather, and you went house to house and said, "Is anybody in this community?" Give them the description: 6'4" to 6'6", white man, kind of a little frightening looking, and he's about 300 and something pounds. Probably you go to 100 houses and you'll get him. Maybe 10, maybe 20.
I mean, how often was that Chevy Avalanche parked outside the house?
According to the neighbors, very often. He wasn't hiding his car.
And they had this. Did they have
2012? 2012.
They knew it was Massapequa Park, and they knew it was a Chevy Avalanche in 2012.
You have a commissioner named Dormer, who's featured in the movie Lost Girls. And you should watch the movie because it'll give you an idea of how they handled this investigation. It could be because they were prostitutes. It also could be, and this is more than speculation, but it's not quite evidence. There was no doubt that they were covering up Oak Beach. There was, I'm sure, and there are some comments also that would support this, that any number of important people in the Suffolk County government that will go into Oak Beach for prostitution, for drugs, and other things. We know, for example, that the police chief, who is now in federal prison, had all kinds of sexual toys or garbage in his car because it was stolen. Somebody stole his bag of whips and I don't know what crazy stuff they have. And when he found the guy, he not only beat the hell out of him, he tortured him. He tied him up and tortured him. And he's now sitting in federal prison for 40 months as a result of that. That's the guy who was conducting the investigation. And they kept trying to steer it away from Oak Beach. And they kept trying to make Shannon's murder separate from the others. It may indeed be separate from the others, but they were really doing it so it wouldn't get investigated. Also, they never brought the FBI in. Well, lo and behold, 2022, change of guard. The Democratic DAs are replaced by a big victory by Ray Tierney, who wins and becomes DA. A new police commissioner is appointed from the New York City Police Department, a chief from the New York City Police Department named Rodney Harrison. The two of them together do something that I think they're going to be very, very well known for and very much prized in the law enforcement community. They now conduct an investigation that is excellent. You couldn't do it. Nobody would do any better than this. Harrison immediately brings the FBI in. He brings in other law enforcement agencies. He creates a task force, which is what you should have done. And he begins to, first of all, go back over the old evidence. And now he starts to develop evidence of his own. And they zero in on Howerman pretty quickly. And then they pick up some very, very critical evidence. They follow Howerman. They put him under surveillance. And they're trying to get DNA from him. And one day he disposes of pizza crust in a garbage pail. And as soon as he's out of the area or he can't see them, they go ahead and they grab it. They find his DNA that way. They connect it to the 4 women that were found on Gilgo Beach, the original Gilgo 4. They also do the same thing at his house, and they pick up stuff from his house. And from that, they get samples of hair. Turns out to be his wife's hair. And the hair is found within the burlap that surrounds the girl's body. So now you have his DNA, his wife's hair, and I should say, don't know how that hair got there from the wife, but she is not a suspect. And probably, unless it dramatically changes, shouldn't be, because in each one of these 3 occasions, in the period of time that he did this, she was not there. In one case, she was in Iceland. And so there's no evidence that suggests she was part of this. But in any event, it's clear with her hair on it, this burlap came from his home. And it's clear that he was involved with them because his DNA is found with their remains. So now you put together the earlier evidence we have. He does have a Chevy Avalanche. He is 6'4" to 6'6". He does live in Massapequa Park. He does work in Midtown Manhattan. Now you got a real case. But that case never would have been made if they didn't have some really excellent, honest law enforcement people who weren't worried about heavy scrutiny for Oak Beach, which somebody should do, because you already have one guy in jail with a connection to it. You got the DA at the time, a DA named Spoda, who went to jail because he covered up the case against the commissioner as a DA. He's gone. He's in jail. So that's where we are right now. And we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I'm going to bring you up to date on, well, first I'm going to complete 1 or 2 thoughts here, some current analysis of what's going on. And then I'm going to give you a list of the things you're not being told by the crooked media. Faith and family, freedom and finance are 4 things that we would do anything to protect. I trust the team at Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors, with providing the advice and sound strategies to take advantage of the inflationary pressures, the high interest rates, and the international challenges we face today. The Kirk Elliott team, with over 29 years of experience, shares our values and believes in people over profit. They can help you protect your finances from the big government policies that are out of our control. So what's in our control? The decision to act or not to act is within our control. I encourage you to act. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors today. Start working with a team that will help you protect your retirement assets with gold and silver while sharing your desire to protect your faith, family, and freedom. Call them today, 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900, and tell them Rudy sent you. Or simply fill out a request for a free consultation at kirkelliottphd.com/Rudy.
All right. And we're back. Thank you. And be sure to give Kirk Elliott, PhD, a call. He's
Kirk will
got a
be
lot
with
of
us
good
on
insight.
Thursday, remember? And I really suggest listening to him, because in addition to his alerting you to his products, which are excellent, and he gives you a very, very good description of the state of the economy and some of the reasons why you have got to be you've got to be very careful about diversifying your portfolio and getting into gold and silver and things like that. So here's the news that I guess wasn't fit to print by the once newspaper, the Times. Well, we mentioned to you, of course, the incredibly ridiculous notice to President Trump, which came to me as a shock, because I didn't think they had a case, to tell you the truth. But in any event, they went ahead with this target letter. So Disney is now doing away with the dwarfs. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs are now going to be Snow White and, I don't know, height challenged individuals, vertically challenged individuals.
You guys aren't all right. You guys aren't using people first language. So not only are you offended. I'm kidding. I was gonna go down a whole spiel, but I'll save that for another night.
The PC term, Mayor, is vertically challenged.
Persons who are vertically challenged.
Persons, because we don't.
You want to start with people
Right,
first.
we don't have male or female anymore. It's
You got to
persons.
acknowledge that they are people too.
Right.
That's what I was told. I'm not even
Persons
kidding.
Persons or people?
I don't know.
People
You
who
can still say people, can't you?
I should have. This was. I don't want to go down a sidetrack here. I was part of a corporate. I won't name the organization, about 10 years ago, and they were starting with this stuff. And I'm thinking, wow, that was a foreshadowing, right? 10 years ago, they were already doing this. I remember how silly it was then. They put us all through training about how to properly address somebody in a wheelchair.
One out just to show you how bad Disney has become.
But let's finish that, Mayor. So Disney, of course, is canceling Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Well, they're rewriting history and removing the dwarves. It's just going to be Snow White and the Seven Advisors, who are on the shorter side.
A classic movie at that. A classic movie that they're ruining.
That children love.
Love that movie.
Also, there's an article here about a very major contributor to the Democrat Party and to Biden in particular, a gentleman named Reid Hoffman, who donated $699,000 recently to the Biden Victory Fund, and he was one of the people that accompanied Epstein to the island of perverts and the island of pedophilia. But nothing's happened to him. I guess maybe. He made that contribution shortly before. Made it 1 week before the Wall Street Journal reported that he had visited the sexual predator's U.S. Virgin Islands compound in 2014 and had other contacts with him. And he at that point, they were calling up, the Wall Street Journal was calling up about the article. So I wonder if he wasn't buying himself a pardon, or even worse than that, nobody's going to touch him because he's a big Democratic donor. But I don't know why he's worried. Isn't it strange that this guy allegedly killed himself because he had all these clients who were pedophiles, and we haven't had even one named? Not even one. I mean, that's as crooked as the White House cocaine investigation. 11 days, and we don't even know if the cameras were working. This is one of the most secure areas of the White House. There have to be cameras.
Man, isn't that just another? Doesn't that just expose these so-called journalists and reporters once again, Mayor? The fact that they talk about the importance of speaking truth to power, right, and all these different things.
Where are the editorials about what the hell's wrong with the Justice Department? They can't find even one person.
Yeah, where are the intrepid reporters, right? Where are the courageous defenders of truth?
Instead, you want to indict Trump because he had alternate electors described as alternate electors?
These reporters they don't even know what they're talking about when they talk about the case. They don't know what an elector is.
There's a serial killing investigation going on in Oregon where 4 of 6 women who were found dead around Portland, and they have a suspect that they've named, Jesse Lee Calhoun, as being responsible for the deaths of 4 of them. You should know he was released from a previous prison sentence early by the Democrat governor, left-wing wacky governor, Kate Brown. So if in fact he turns out to be the serial killer, you can thank a Democratic governor for the fact that it happened. And the candidate Cornel West, who's running against Biden, or actually running for president, delivered a speech in which he said that Black folks are a low priority to Biden. That it's not enough to put Black faces in high places, and not do any substantive change, which is true. He gave Biden a C for his performance on race, and he then pointed out that there's no question the president is slowing down, and that his cognitive powers are in decline, and that he has in fact politicized and weaponized the government against his enemies. So he is the Green Party candidate for president. Got to be a problem for Sleepy Joe, huh? Crooked Joe, I guess, is the new description of him. I don't think you're going to hear reported anywhere that Trump has more cash on hand than any candidate for president, including Joe Biden, even though Biden raised more. Trump hasn't spent it. And really what matters at this point is not how much you raised in the early part of the case. How much money do you have?
And your burn rate.
And Trump has the most money, way more than the Republican candidates, and even more than Biden. I don't think you're going to find that anywhere else. I don't think you're going to find anywhere else that Alvin Bragg, the best friend of criminals in New York City, who releases them all and is largely responsible for a lot of the crime that we have here because he puts out on the street the people who commit it. He says he's afraid of the subways, and he doesn't like the idea that his mother uses the subways. Well, his mother is afraid of them. Well, his mother should tell him to start enforcing the law. What do you think? Huh? Wouldn't be bad if her son started to act like a DA instead of a guy who just wants to put criminals out on the street so that he can fulfill his obligations to Soros or to his communist philosophy. I don't know which it is. And just to give you an idea that the profile of these serial killers is pretty darn good, one of the first things that Howerman did when he went into prison, he asked how much publicity was the case getting. and appeared to be quite happy that it was getting a lot of publicity.
And
Because, I mean, and in many cases, the psychiatrists and psychologists will say that a lot of this is done for attention. Well, this is a great piece of evidence that, in fact, they're right about that.
Well, Mayor, we of course will continue to follow all of the updates on the Gilgo Beach serial killer, and we'll continue, of course, to be following the target. What we now know is a target letter has been sent to the president. We don't actually have an indictment yet, but of course, we now know, those of us that have been following this, that this usually means, and the mayor, of course, being one of the top prosecutors in American history, can tell you, target letters usually lead to indictments.
Right.
And so
they usually do. They don't always do, but I would say in a high profile case, even more often. So,
and of course, we'll want to let everyone know too to tune in to Newsmax television during the 10 p.m. hour. The mayor will be on with the great Greg Kelly and his great show. And he'll be on tonight at 10 p.m.
And I have to tell you that worth listening to him, because he's got one of the best handles on this case. And so does my other colleague at WABC, Curtis Slewer. And in the next couple of nights, we'll have Curtis on, because Curtis can go into, he was involved in following this day by day when it happened. And he has some really good information about the political corruption side of this. So we'll have Curtis on as well. But definitely watch Greg tonight. I'm not sure I'll be talking to him about this. We may be talking about the letter, the target letter.
Yeah.
But whatever it is,
it's always a good talk.
Whatever it is during the course of the show, he'll bring you a lot of interesting analysis of this case.
That's right. So we'll want to see you all again in about an hour. Newsmax television. Check your local listings.
And don't forget, come back to us tomorrow. We'll be here 8 o'clock tomorrow. And again at 3 o'clock on WABCRadio.com. And you can get it all over the country, all over the world. If you do that, WABCRadio.com. Or do me a favor, get the app. Do me a second favor, go on Twitter.
And subscribe.
And this one, we're going to have a lot of additional information. Like, we will put out on there the entire 911 call, so you can listen to it yourself, either in the abbreviated version or the full 32-minute version, and come to your own conclusion about Shannon, whether she died of natural causes or she was murdered. Well, thank you very, very much, and I really appreciate your tuning in with us. I appreciate your support. And let's stick together. We got a big job in 2024, and we've just begun to fight. God, America.
Our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought to us the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained, by rational principles, the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the Kingdom of Great Britain and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, for freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability to select the people who govern them. And he explained it in ways that were understandable to all the people, not just the elite. Because the desire for freedom is universal. The desire for freedom adheres in the human mind, and it is part of the human soul. This is exactly the time we should consult our history. Look at what we've done in the past and see if we can't use it to help us now. We understand that our founders created the greatest country in the history of the world, the greatest democracy, the freest country, a country that has taken more people out of poverty than any country ever. All of us are so fortunate to be Americans. But a great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we're able to reason, we're able to talk, we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it.